Stopping Willow at the door.
I got it.
Well, come on. You want to come with me? She needs a lighter clothes too.
I'll do it first.
Okay.
Come on, Clyde, home.
Okay, sorry, I had to help with Willow. Sorry. Hello. Who do we have so far? Oh, we have Monique. Hi. We have Alan. Oh, and Alan, maybe your wife joined us? I'm not sure. Perfect. I'm running a little late, about 6 minutes late, latest I've been. Yeah. Oh, Willow's in the other room. She'll be back out. She's getting ready to go on a walk, but she and Bryce will be by before they go for their walk. For those of you that are just joining us, we are in our continuing saga reading Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business. If you would like to see what like without flipped text, this is the book we've been reading every other day. We read a new chapter written in the 90s, or at least published in the 90s. Let me flip it back around. I wear a new wig, or I do something new to the wig every day, because I feel like what is best than Dolly Parton and a wig? Okay, so if you're just joining us, last time we read, it was chapter 8. I have to do a quick, I should start making notes of what I read because I want to do a quick recap. It followed up on Dolly Parton's record that she wrote did for the first time when she was really young. She went back to school, finished up high school. She got to sing on the Grand Ole Opry. What else happened? Oh, we learned a little bit about her friend. Her friend that was one of the very few she had. Her name was Judy. Judy was one of her best friends. Very few. I think it was last chapter. Oh, no, that was the chapter before. Oh, we learned a little bit about the time that Dolly Parton sat on a raccoon in the middle of the night when she was trying to pee in their bathroom in their house. And we looked at a couple pictures of Dolly Parton when she was a child. Let's see, I'm going to bring those back up. This was Dolly Parton senior year. Look at that. And this was Dolly Parton in a publicity picture that they did for when she was with the record store. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 9. We're missing a couple of our regulars. I see that they haven't come on, so hopefully it wasn't because I was late, but hopefully they'll be here. I'm going to get a quick cup or drink of coffee. I just made a cup. We're having a little late start here. We, on a side note, we were very appreciative for all the customers who have done online orders and helped keep our, I guess, sale lights on. Every few dollars helps. We're very appreciative of that, and I had to take care of a few orders with our girl in Hermosa Beach that is doing virtual shopping today, so we've had a little bit of late delay. Okay, enough about that. Let's go right into it. We are in chapter 9. Okay, I continue to bide my time in school, waiting to be 18, waiting to be free, waiting to follow my dream. I still sang on the Cass Walker show during breaks from school. Again, Cass Walker was a guy who ran a local radio show in their neck of the woods that they lived in, and she got her first start there. Okay. It was during one such break in 1963 that the boy I was dating at the time agreed to drive me to Knoxville to do the show. He was a good-looking boy who had always been nice to me. He had a pretty good car with a radio that worked, so I was looking forward to the trip with him. We were riding along listening to WIVK. The country music program was interrupted by a special bulletin. What I heard sent my heart crashing through the floorboards. Even the radio reporter's voice quivered with emotion as he announced that President John F. Kennedy had been shot and killed in Dallas. Yes, little lady, come here. Come say hi to people before you go on your walk.
All right.
Come here.
Is Sandy there?
No. There's a few people. I think Monique was here. My mom is here, maybe.
Hi.
Not sure who's stuck around so far. Here's Willow.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. Bill might be back before we finish. Okay, we'll see you guys.
Okie dokie.
Have a good walk. 6 feet away.
6 feet away. Come on, Clyde. You get down too.
Okay. I had loved John. Oh, Nana says hi. Nana said hi. I had loved John Kennedy. Not in the way a woman loves a man, but in the way one idealist recognizes another and loves him for that place within themselves that they share. I didn't know a lot about politics, but I knew that a lot of things were wrong and unjust, and that Kennedy wanted to change them. He was young. He looked at the country with fresh eyes that saw what his predecessors could not nor would not. I grieved for the country, for the loss of a spirit that young people and poor people and downtrodden people could share and call their own. I was choked silent. I was numb. That turned out to be fortunate. Otherwise, I don't think my heart could have stood what happened next. On hearing the news that had sent me into such grief, my boyfriend said, I'm glad they shot the... I'm not going to say the word because I can't, even though it's written in the book. I'm just going to say it starts with the N word. I'm glad they shot the N-loving son of a bitch. I couldn't believe what I had heard. I couldn't believe that a young person with whom I had shared intimacy and laughter could be so ignorant, biased, and insensitive. How could he dismiss a man, any human being, with so callous and hateful a remark? I suppose in your heart you always knew such people exist, but you don't want to believe those close to you be that way. It was obvious to me that a person who thought that way could never understand or truly appreciate me or anything that I believed in. The show was canceled that night. I got the boy to drive me home. I never saw him again and never gave him the explanation. I didn't feel he deserved one. More than that, I knew he didn't have the sensitivity to understand anyway. At times like that, I did have some real friends to turn to, especially my soulmate, Judy Ogle. Remember, Judy was her best friend from last chapter we learned about. We shared some other friends too. Judy's other best friend was Shirley King. She was the twin sister of Dewey King, the boy who had bought me my pie at the pie supper. Then there was my best friend Georgia, Road Hog Justice. She is my cousin also. But then in those parts, who's not? We called her Road Hog because of the way she drove the rattletrap of a car that her daddy had gotten for her. None of us knew nothing about driving. I guess Georgia was afraid of running into something on the side of the road or into the ditch because she could kind of take her half of the road out in the middle. The rest of us didn't care so much as long as we had a ride, but other drivers used to honk at her all the time. That old car served for many songwriting night and day and for chasing boys. Georgia and I were just a little wilder than most of the other girls. We were kin after all, and wild hares did run rampant in our family. We used to cruise Gatlinburg and Seaverville, circling the tasty freeze, flirting with the boys and singing. I'd always carry my guitar. Most of the girls round there were kind of shy, and I would always manage to attract the boys with my singing and joking. Georgia listened to my dreams like Judy did. She believed me when I talked about all the things I was going to do. She loved the songs I'd write and took pride in the fact that I'd wrote them in her car. I knew she did, because she recently went on a segment of Geraldo about growing up with the celebrities and said so. That was definitely not a recent Geraldo. Geraldo's kind of crazy these days. Georgia was my cousin on my daddy's side. A cousin on my mama's side was a good friend to me too. Hope McCann. Her mama was my great aunt, Exa. Exa. E-X-A. Now that's a unique name. She and her husband, Cleo McMahon, owned a little grocery store. They were very good about allowing people to have credit during the hard winter months, and then pay when times were better. They probably kept many a family up there from starving to death. For those of you that are just joining us, we are reading Chapter 9 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. Okay, here we go. Keeping on the story. I don't think Hope necessarily believed all my talk about being a star. At that time, she thought I was just full of myself or something. She was the one who gave Judy Ogle the nickname Bootin'. Anytime there was a game of any kind, Hope would be like a cheerleader saying, "We're a rootin' for Bootin'." Judy and I had other friends. Judy and I had other friend who was very dear to both of us. Her name was Colleen Reagan. She was a beautiful girl with coal black hair and chiseled features. Her mother had died when Colleen was very young, during the birth of Colleen's baby brother Shelby. There were 5 kids altogether, including Colleen's twin brother Carl, and 2 sisters, Maxine and Charlotte. They had a real tough time growing up without a mother. To make things worse, their daddy was a heavy drinker. Colleen adored Elvis. A lot of girls liked Elvis. Some girls wanted to have Elvis. Colleen wanted to be Elvis. She cut her hair short and swept it back like his. She even fashioned some of the front part into the sideburns that came down in front of the ears. She had gotten a leather jacket from somewhere, and she would wiggle her hips and wobble around, shaking her leg just like the king. She was normally a very shy girl, but when she was Elvis, she was a tiger. I guess in a way, it was an escape from some pretty rough times. When word went around that Elvis was going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show, Colleen was just hell-bent on going to see him. Almost anybody, or almost nobody up there had a TV. Most of the ones who did wouldn't let any of the kids watch Elvis on it because they said he was vile and of the devil. Well, Colleen knew this one old lady who never missed Ed Sullivan and would no doubt have her set turned in to the show that night. She and her sisters decided to sneak off over there to watch Elvis, even if it meant they'd have to watch through the old lady's window. As they were walking into the yard that night, they got attacked by a pack of dogs and were bitten all over. They finally did get to see Elvis, but then Colleen was beaten up when she got home because she had snucken off. I doubt anybody ever paid a higher price to see Elvis. Just if you're joining us right now, we are reading Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business. Chapter 9. She is talking about all of her family members that are her friends right now and going to sneak into someone's backyard to see Elvis. I'm taking a drink of coffee. And we're back. Oh, I should probably hold it up higher because you can't really see it in the text. Sorry. Okay. Here we go. She acted it all out for those of us who didn't see him. Shaking her pelvis, doing the upper lip, the whole thing. It all seemed worth it. We didn't care that she got chewed up either. To us, and for that moment, she was Elvis. Colleen's Elvis phase continued for quite a while after that. She eventually married my Uncle Lewis Owens, the one who gave me my first guitar and helped me out in Nashville. Colleen always had a fascination with hair, and after they were married, she went to beauty school. I volunteered to be her model. She practiced every perm, every style, every color on me. I even went with her to the state board to model for her when she got her license. She did my hair for the Cass Walker show and later in Nashville. We really got into some big hair together. Friends like Colleen and the others helped make my high school years fun, although I never took my mind off my ultimate goal. I remember New Year's Eve, 1964. I was so excited that I waited up to welcome not only the new year but the sunrise as well. This was the year I was to graduate high school, the year I'd finally be free to pursue my dream full time. It was long has been a custom for graduating class to go on a senior trip. Mine was no exception. To pay for the trip, we sold Krispy Kreme donuts, all kinds of candy, burpee seeds, and whatever else a group of kids could sell, usually to their parents. 1964 was also the year of the New York World's Fair, and that was to be our adventure, with Washington, D.C. thrown in for good measure. Try to imagine several busloads of backwoods kids riding all the way to New York, the twangy cries of, "Are we there yet?" I'm going to move my chair closer. Okay. "Are we there yet?" The numerous stops to pee, the questions about everything, and every place we passed on the way. The bus drivers and I will never forget the moment we finally rolled through the Lincoln Tunnel into New York. And on a side note, if you've ever been to New York, there is nothing like going through the Lincoln Tunnel and you get into the city. It is one of my favorite places. We always joke that if there was affordable housing, I would live there in a heartbeat. But of course, I got a child and I got Bryce, and I don't think I'd want to live there right now. But bless those New Yorkers, they sure have a hard time going on right now. But they will come back. They are tough people. But yeah, back to it. Lincoln Tunnel, it is remarkable when you go through that tunnel into the city. Oh, God. It'll be nice when I go back. When we go back. We'll be going back for who knows what. But anyways, back to the story. Woo! I digress. Everywhere you looked, on buses, on billboards, on tops of taxis, were the words, "Hello, Dolly." Naturally, I made jokes. I don't know how they knew I was coming, and I didn't know they'd make such a fuss. Were they sort of things I didn't know they make such a fuss. Were the sort of things my classmates had to put up with all day long. Of course, we found out that Hello, Dolly was a new Broadway show, but to me, it was still a great welcome to the world outside the mountains. The one I had always lived for, the ones where I would be a star. Years later, I was in fact welcomed to New York in almost as grand a style and given the key to the city by then Mayor Ed Koch. I have always felt welcome in New York City and still get a feeling of exhilaration every time I see the skyline loom up on in the distance. Graduation day itself was almost a non-event for me. What I was really anticipating was heading for Nashville the following day. I was proud that I had earned my diploma, though, by my skin of my teeth. And Mama was very proud, too. She and some of my brothers and sisters attended the ceremony. It wasn't like Daddy to leave his plow for such a thing. It was a small class. Oh, my mom's telling everybody that she's my mom and Nana. It was such a small class, so each of us, in turn, got a chance to stand up and announce our plans for the future. I'm going to junior college, one boy would say. I'm getting married and moving to Marysville, a girl would follow. When it came my turn, I told what I considered to be the truth. I'm going to Nashville to become a star. I said as straightforwardly as I could. The entire place erupted in laughter. I was stunned. What were they laughing at? I remember thinking to myself, they don't know. They just don't know. Somehow that laughter instilled in me an even greater determination to realize my dream in a kind of I'll show them way. It is very likely that I might have crumbled under the weight of the hardship that were to come, had it not been for the response of the crowd that day. Sometimes it's funny the way we find inspiration. Those of us who know God don't find it all that strange. Early next morning, I boarded a Greyhound bus with my dreams, my guitar, the songs I had written, and the rest of my belongings in a sort of matching luggage. 3 paper bags from the same grocery store. I had asked whatever relative could afford to give me a graduation gift to please make it cash. I didn't want any additional baggage, and I knew I would need the money for a grub steak until I became a star. I genuinely thought that would happen before my little bit of money ran out. I suppose if it weren't for naivety and foolhardy, pig-headed stubbornness, nobody would have ever seen their dreams through, except for lottery winnings. There are few things of any value that come without some trials and disappointments. Some disappointment I was prepared for. I was not prepared for the amount I dealt with. Those of you just joining us, I see we have a bunch of new people. We are reading the Dolly Parton biography from the 90's, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. New wig every time we read. We are in chapter 9, and she has just graduated high school, and she is going off to Nashville. So here we go. My money disappeared in no time. I was hungry and homesick and disheartened. I had never slept in a bed by myself before. I missed things like my brother and sister toenails digging into my shins. Believe it or not, I even missed being peed on. I wrote the following letter home. June 2nd, 1964. Dear Nashville, Tennessee. Oh wait, I should be writing this too. Dear Mama and Daddy, I hope this letter finds you well. As for me, I'm fine, I guess. Just a little lonesome and a whole lot of homesick. I got here okay, and I thought I'd write to you to let you know because I knew you'd be worried about me. I don't want you to be worried about me because I'm going to be all right once I get settled and used to being away from home. I didn't realize how much I loved you and them noisy kids until I left. And I didn't realize how hard it was to leave at home until I started to leave and everybody started crying. I cried nearly all the way, and in a way, I wanted to turn around and come back. But you know how I've always wanted to move to Nashville and be a singer and believe that somebody, if I try long and hard enough, I'll make it happen. Don't worry about trying to send me no money or anything because I've got a job on an early morning TV show and a couple of people that might record one of the songs I wrote. So I'll be making some money. So don't worry about me being hungry or anything. Nashville is not exactly what I thought it would be, but I think I'm going to like it here once I get used to it. Don't worry about me getting in trouble. I'll be good just like I promised. Well, I guess I'd better be closed for now. Write soon and tell everybody I said hello. With love as always, Dolly. I knew I had painted the picture a little brighter than I actually was for Mama and Daddy's sake, but I didn't realize how much I had lied, especially the part about not being hungry. I remember old stories people would tell me about times during the Depression when down and out diners would go to a cafe and order on a pie and float, a glass of water, and a toothpick. I had heard of people making soup out of hot water and ketchup. I can tell you personally, it's not very satisfying. At a time like that, you can either dine for as long as you possibly on your own fingernails or learn to get on by some other way. I tried both. Hold on, I'm going to just check something really quick. Whoa, this is a very long chapter, I just realized. Whoa. So we'll get through this. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Okay. I would sometimes go to hotels at night and walk up and down the halls until I found a room service tray that had been left outside. The door for pickup. Sometimes those selfish hotel guests would clean their plates. Other times I would find half of a sandwich on an uneaten piece of chicken. Occasionally I would lift a cover and find the motherlode part of a steak. I have always hated to see food wasted in a world where so many people are hungry. In those days, that had a personal meaning for me, and I did my best to see that. At least in that hotel, no food was wasted. It's not something I'm proud of, but I would do a little eating on the sly at grocery stores. I would get a cart and wheel it through the aisles. While I pretended to shop, I would pick up items I could easily open and eat from the packages. I would eat a bag of potato chips while pretending to check the produce for ripeness, or I'd drink a pint of milk while trying to decide which brand of coffee I was going to buy. I would hurriedly gag down a handful of bologna and cheese while keeping an eye out for the store clerks. Finally, I'd put my cart away and make my escape. If I had any money at all, I usually tried to buy one item, a pack of gum or something. I guess in my mind that somehow made it better. Even basically an honest person can do a desperate thing when hunger begins gnawing at them. But I shop now at all the stores I stole from, so I more than paid them back. I lived in a little apartment at Wedgwood Avenue. There was a laundromat downstairs called the Wishy Washy. One day while I was waiting for my clothes to dry, I bought a Coke and sipped it as I walked around on the sidewalk out front. I remember I was wearing a red ruffled rib tucker outfit with tight bell-bottom pants. If someone had asked me, I would have said that looking for a man was the last thing on my mind. Now that I think back on the way I was dressed, maybe my subconscious was doing a little bit of trolling. A man drove by and said something like, "You're gonna get a sunburn in that outfit." "That's all right," I said, giving him a wave. I have always tried to be friendly. Besides, there's just a natural reaction to a country person when a car goes by. Your hand flies up. It never occurred to me that perhaps a young girl shouldn't be waving at strange men in the cars. I guess the man liked what he saw because he drove around the block and came by again. This time he stopped his car and began flirting with me. He was drop dead handsome, so I wasn't bothered much. I talked with him a while and we made a few jokes back and forth. When I told him I had to take my clothes out of the dryer, I expected him to go on his way. I was shocked when he came inside the laundromat with me. I didn't want this handsome man with his fine car watching me while I folded my ragged drawers. He wasn't interested in my drawers, at least not the ones I was folding. I was surprised and delighted that while he talked to me, he looked at my face, a rare thing for me. He seemed to be genuinely interested in finding out who I was and what I was about. What I was about at that moment was, of course, being interested in him. He was so different from the men I had known back home. Once I had a boyfriend back in Seaverville who'd bought me a ring and put a down payment on a house, expecting me to marry him. Perhaps if he had asked me about it, he might have stood a better chance, but I doubt it. I had no plans to marry him or anyone else. I was here to become a star. Dolly, we're reading My Life and Other Unfinished Business. But in spite of all that, there was something irresistible about this man. I remember looking into his eyes and getting the most wonderful feeling. I said to myself, well, I'll be dogged. The man's name was Carl Dean. He came to see me every day for the next week. I was babysitting to earn a little extra money. That meant I couldn't leave the house, so a real date was out of the question. Still, Carl would just come and sit with me at the bottom of the steps next to the wishy-washy, where I could keep an eye out for the little boy. I wasn't wishy-washy about keeping my eye on the big boy. Finally, the child's mother had a day off and we could have a genuine date. Carl picked me up right on time. He had always been prompt. He has always been mysterious. He didn't give me any kind of hint as to where we were going. We are reading Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, the 1990s biography. For those that are just joining us, we are in chapter 9. So I didn't know how to dress or anything. As we drove along, Katie made it. No worries. As everyone knows, if you're just joining us or if you were late or not, you can always watch this video after we are done playing it. So, here we go. Okay, keep it on. We're in chapter 9. Inside, his mother was just putting on... Oh, wait. Skipped a few. As we drove along, I was trying to see what part of town we were heading for to get some clue as to what was up. I was surprised when we pulled into the driveway for a private home. Carl walked me to the door and opened it. Inside, his mother was just putting supper on the table. Without any other word of introduction, Carl said to his mother, "Fix this girl a plate. She's the one I'm going to marry." With a nervous laugh, I tried to acknowledge that he had made a little joke. But something in his voice told me he hadn't. In all my life, I have never felt such an odd combination of emotion. First, I was shocked that he wanted to marry me, since he had never given me any indication that he cared that much for me. Second, I was astounded. I remember thinking, who the hell does this guy think he is? I felt flattened, outraged, touched, turned on, scared to death, and completely confused. The boy back home who had bought the house was not even this presumptuous. At least, he had said he loved me at some point. There I was, feeling as mixed up as a road lizard in a spin dryer, and having to act sociable while trying to keep my dinner down. I somehow got through the meal and worked things out of my own mind enough to keep seeing Carl. I soon moved into a different apartment. It was in a part of town where I didn't know anybody, and I was very lonely much of the time. I didn't have a radio or TV, and without a car, I was left to just entertain myself. Of course, my favorite way to do that was to sing and play and write songs. Carl often showed up without warning, sometimes even in the middle of the night. I was glad to see him because I was becoming more and more serious about him, but some of his behavior did seem awfully odd. In fact, he seemed odd. Maybe the fact that he was so different made me that much more attracted to him. He was always a perfect gentleman, though. I guess if I had to say one thing about Carl, it would be that he is not only a gentleman, but a truly gentle man. We would usually sit on the porch so that the neighbors could see that we weren't doing anything improper. If we were inside, Carl would always leave the door open. He had a little transistor radio, the kind from Japan, that was so popular in the 60s. I thought it was just the greatest thing in the world. We would sit and talk and hold hands and kiss and listen to that little old radio. Otis Redding was our favorite. These Arms of Mine and I've Been Loving You Too Long were our special songs. In all this time, Carl never said he loved me. He had never even said he liked me. He had and has a strange way of talking and an odd sense of humor. He was so handsome, though. I used to wonder if he had other girlfriends, but he never said or did anything to lead me to believe it. Here I was falling more and more deeply in love with a man who had never given me any indication at all about his feelings for me. That made it much more horrifying to me the day he waltzed in and told me he was joining the army and going to Vietnam. I went berserk. If I had any doubts about my feelings for him, they were instantly washed away in a flood of tears. The lump in my throat told me in no uncertain terms I did not want to lose this man. The next thing that happened made me want to strangle him. Carl took me by the shoulders and told me it wasn't true, at least not the part about Vietnam. He was joining the National Guard and was going away to boot camp. That was only a slim chance. There was only a slim chance he might be sent to Vietnam. Having come to know Carl as I do now, he probably painted a worse picture for me so the real story would be easier for me to take. He does things like that. Sometimes I still want to strangle him, but his heart is usually in the right place. Lucky for him, his throat is in the right place too, making it difficult for me to reach. As Carl boarded the bus for boot camp, he still had not told me he loved me, and had never asked or even suggested that I wait for him, but I did. Finally, he called and asked me if I wanted to come see him. He was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, near Savannah. So I planned a trip to Jekyll Island with Judy and some of my younger brothers and sisters so that I could be near enough to visit him. I took Judy and the kids to the beach and then set out for the army camp. I remember it was one of the first times I had ever worn a wig. It was just a short one, relatively small compared to some of the hair mountains. Oh, kind of like this wig today. Today's wig of choice was a shorter one. I have these days. It was styled in one of those 60s bouffants that are embarrassing when you look at old pictures of yourself at that time. I thought I really looked good. It took me a while to find Carl. When I did, I ran up and threw myself into his arms. He is about 6 feet 2 inches tall. When I hugged him so hard, his chin grazed the top of my head, sending my wig flying. Carl never missed a beat. He caught my wig in one hand while he continued to hold me with the other. He gave me a deep, slow, passionate kiss. I felt that he was genuinely glad to see me. Either that or the National Guard issues handguns to new recruits. I was certainly relieved because I had obviously flipped my wig over him. While Carl was away at boot camp, I threw myself into my work. Of course, my work at that time consisted mostly of trying to find work. After a lot of knocking on doors and singing here and there, I finally began to become what people in the business call hooked up. I did live spots on the Ralph Emery Show and another early morning radio show, the Eddie Hill Show. Being on one of those shows meant you would be singing at 5 o'clock in the morning. Anybody who sings can tell you that your voice is not likely to be at its best at that hour, but I did the best I could. Uncle Bill also had been working his way up the ladder, mainly playing guitar for Carl and Pearl Butler. But that meant he had to spend a lot of time on the road. Finally, we got our first big break with Fred Foster, who owned both Combine Publishing and Monument Records, signed us to a deal. Fred invested a lot of time and effort and money in me. He bought clothes for me so that I would look the part. He made a great effort to get me known. I thought of myself as a country singer, and that was all I had ever wanted to be. But Fred thought I should be more rockabilly. He must have had a vision of making me into a female Elvis or something. He did various things to promote my career, such as booking me on American Bandstand and a jukebox convention in Chicago. Going to Chicago meant I had to fly on an airplane for the first time in my life. What a first flight it was! It was stormy and the winds were gusty. We just had a pause for poor connection. Once in a while that happens. Okay. Going to Chicago meant I had to fly on an airplane for the first time in my life. What a first flight it was. It was stormy and the winds were gusty and my plane was bumpy and bumped and battered around the whole way to Chicago. I was miserable. I did my best at the convention, but I couldn't really enjoy any of the trip because I knew I had to get back on a plane to go home. To this day, I am a white-knuckled flyer. I make a joke about it in one of my songs. She's a sparrow when she's broken, but she's a chicken when she flies, from the song Eagle When She Flies. Again, we are reading Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business from the 90's, on chapter 9. This wig is a little itchy today. Carl finally came home and would come to see me almost every night, usually staying on up to the wee hours. He was working with his father in his asphalt paving business in South Nashville, and I was living in Madison, Tennessee. Between that and the time he spent with me, he wasn't getting any sleep at all. Finally, one day, he said, quite matter-of-factly, "You're either going to have to move to the other side of town or we're going to have to get married." That, to Carl, was a proposal. People always want to know how he asked me to marry him. And I always have to say, he didn't exactly ask. Part of me was thrilled that he wanted to marry, but another part of me was a little taken aback. That must have been the strangest part, or the strongest part, because that was the one that answered. "You never have even said you loved me. Hell, you know I love you," was Carl's answer. I attribute this to the same kind of unspoken communication that I explained when describing life with my daddy. It is one of the Parton Dean rules of conduct. I have become a one-woman committee to abolish that. Always at holidays or other family gatherings, people would hug and say goodbye, but they would never say, "I love you." Sure, I know that the love is there, but damn it, I want to hear it. I was the first one in my family that I know of to ever tell my other family members that I loved them. One day, after I had been living away from home for many years, I was saying goodbye to Daddy when I told him I love you. He responded in the usual nonverbal look at the ground Parton way, and I just couldn't stand it anymore. I took his head between my hands and made him look me right in the eye. "You tell me you love me. I'll be damned," I demanded. With no small amount of embarrassment, he said, "You know, I love yins." A mountain word for meaning more than one. "Not yuns," I kept on. "This has got nothing to do with Cassie or Bobby or anything else, or anybody else. I want to know if you," I emphasized the word by poking my finger into his chest, "do you love me?" I said with an empathetic point towards myself. He tried to look to one side, but I held his face firmly. He blushed, sputtered, and finally haltingly said, "I love you." That must have been the crack in the dam. Once the top man had fallen, it was much easier to teach the rest of the Partons to say, "I love you." Now it is something we do all freely. It is still not something Carl does on a regular basis, but now and then in a kind of sidewinding way he will say it. Carl's mother was ecstatic that we planned to marry. Her only daughter had eloped, and she never got to throw a big wedding for her. So she was very excited about giving one for me and Carl. I told Fred Foster I wanted to get married, and he asked me to wait until my career was on a firmer footing. He felt that having a husband would take away some of my appeal to men in the record buying public. I told him I would, and then broke the bad news to Carl. Oh, the bad news to Carl. He didn't want to wait. And since he was still the perfect gentleman, and I was getting pretty horny, I wasn't too keen on waiting either. We told everybody that we had to postpone the wedding. Then we secretly made plans to get married in another state so that it would not be recorded in the Tennessee newspapers. We decided on Ringgold, Georgia, where, as its name implies, has a whole industry built around hasty wedding rings. You could literally get a blood test at a roadside stand and get a marriage license. For those of you that, oh God, I just turned the scan. Sorry. Okay. I don't know why I turned the screen around by accident. She's getting married to Carl. They went to Ringgold, Georgia, which, as its name implies, has a whole industry built around hasty weddings. You could literally get a blood test at a roadside stand, and getting a marriage license was as easy as a drive-through. I wanted to have my mother at my wedding, so we took Mama and headed off to Ringgold. Mama made me a wisp of a veil to go with a white eyelet dress she had also made. She had also wrapped a little white Bible in lace and tied it up with field flowers for me to carry. It was a Friday when we got to Ringgold. We got our licenses without effort at the city hall. The judge or justice of the peace, or whatever title that man had, spit his tobacco against a wall and started in on the marriage rites. "Wait," I said, "I want to get married in the church." Well, between spits, the judge explained that we only could be married right away if we did it right there at the courthouse. If we waited to be married anywhere else, we would have to wait until Monday. I'm sure that rule was to enable the city to make a few extra dollars. If not, by the fees charged at the courthouse, then from the motel taxes, a motel was way beyond our budget. But I was determined to be married in a church. We decided to go back to Tennessee and return on Monday. So here I was, trying to get married to a man who hadn't really asked me, with a boss that didn't want me to, in a town that wouldn't let me do it when I wanted. Yet I knew in my heart it was right. I couldn't wait till Monday to pick where I was going to be married, so we drove around town until we found Ringgold Baptist Church. We went in and had a chat with the minister. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just seemed to sense by looking at Carl and me that we were sincere about being together for life. The minister, Don Duval, shook our hands and said he'd be pleased to marry us on Monday. Finally, here was somebody other than Carl who wanted me to get married. I couldn't help grabbing him and giving him a big hug. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about the Monday rule either, so off we went back to Nashville. That weekend seemed about a decade long. I came to understand that saying that goes, when you've found the one you want to spend the rest of your life with, you want to start the rest of your life right away. Mama stayed with me that Saturday and Sunday. Now, I love Mama, but she wasn't exactly the companion I'd hoped to have those 2 nights. There's a funny thing about time and how long or short a piece of it can seem. It depends on what you're doing and, more importantly, who you're doing it with. It may be discovered someday that an orgasm actually lasts for hours and only seems like a few seconds. Dolly Parton surely went for it. Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, if you're just joining us. Chapter 9 is where we're at. Monday came on the back of the snail. We put our things in the back in the car and drove around some 150 miles to Ringgold once again. On Memorial Day, May 30th, 1966, Carl and I had a sweet little wedding service with Mama and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Mama had brought her camera and snapped a few pictures. Because of the Monday rule, we were now pressed for time. Carl had to be at work the next morning, and I had agreed to do the Ralph Emery show, which was done live at an ungodly hour. I would have to get up at 3 o'clock the next morning to prepare. Our plan was to drive Mama to Chattanooga, where she would catch a bus back to Sevierville. Then we would head to Nashville to spend whatever time we could as a man and wife before the alarm went off. We almost got to Chattanooga when Mama threw a monkey wrench in our plans. She realized with horror that she had left her handbag at the church. It was obvious there was nothing we could do but go back to Ringgold to get it. I'm afraid Carl was a lot more generous with his new mother-in-law than I felt like being at that moment. We drove all the way back and got the purse, then retraced our tire tracks, and finally delivered Mama to Chattanooga. By the time we got to Nashville and our bed, there was only a little while left before I was due on the Ralph Emery show. I guess we could say our honeymoon was about 2 hours long. We made the most of those 2 hours, though, and to his credit, I will say that for a man who had had trouble telling me he loved me, he left no doubt about it that night. We never got to have a real honeymoon until a year later. That year gave me a little time to learn more about this odd man that I had married after an even odder courtship. I'm still learning about him to this day. I think that's the way a relationship should be. It's wonderful to have the feeling of comfort and security that comes from believing you completely know a person inside and out, but it's also exciting to know in the back of your mind you actually don't. I guess I will always keep learning about Carl, but it seems only fair that I make an effort to bring you up to speed. Here we go. This is Carl's background story. Like I said, this is a longer chapter. We are about 6 pages away. We'll keep this going. Instagram cuts you off on the live at an hour, I think. So we're going to keep pressing through. We've got some more time. Don't worry. Here we go. Carl Thomas Dean was named for one of his dad's army buddies, the Carl Part. The Thomas came from St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville, where he was born on July 20th, 1942. His mother's name is Virginia Bates Dean, and his father is Edgar Henry Dean, although they're known as Jenny and Ed. They are both from Dixon, Tennessee, and have 2 other children, Sandra and Donnie. They are a small family compared to mine. I have come to love them all very much. Donnie and his wife, Karen, have 2 wonderful children, Elliot and Carson. Sandra is married to Neil Chafin, and they have a lovely family, Dia, Chad, and Joshua. In the next generation, Dia and her husband, Andy Cunningham, have a beautiful daughter named Kristen. They have a beautiful daughter named Christian. Yeah, I read it right. Christian, not Christina, Christian. And Chad, his wife, have 2 sweet kids, Chase and Brooke. That's very strange. Okay. Carl's mother, Mama Dean to me, was always one of my best friends. She was the rock of that family and had a great influence on Carl, who has always been a mama's boy. We lost her to liver cancer a few years ago. I still think of her every day. She was pregnant with Carl when Ed had to go away to the war. During his early life, Carl and his mother lived with his grandmother and grandfather, Minnie and Con Bates. If you're just joining us, we're reading the background story of Dolly Parton's husband, Carl Thomas Dean, from her biography. Okay. He was very attached to those 2 women, Minnie and Con Bates. He still loves to cook, sew, and do housework. Although he's a very rugged outdoorsman, still, he's got that sweet, gentle streak that I love so much. Carl is not easy to know. He has his favorites, and it's not hard to tell who they are. He has favorites among my sisters, among my nieces, and among my nieces and friends. He has other favorite women scattered in various places, whether it be the girl at the bank, the insurance company, or whatever. He communicates well with women and he loves to brag on them, as long as it's okay with me, which it always is. He always checks women out, whether it's okay with me or not. He only looks and talks. I believe with all my heart that I am the only woman Carl has ever been intimate with. He is true and a devoted husband. He is a true and devoted husband, friend, and son. He never misses his weekly visits to spend the day with his dad. I love Ed. We have a special kind of communication. He's a lot like Carl. The two of them have become much closer since Mama Dean's death. They go to the races and ball games and things that they like together often. I guess you could say that my husband is a wonderful combination of men. He's a great mechanic who will work all day on a truck or a tractor and then come in and sew up the pocket of his old work shirt. He loves to buy an old junk car and fix it up. He'll work and sweat until he absolutely falls over. He can fix anything. Like they say, it's nice to have a man around the house. Well, it's especially nice to have all those men around the house and all in the body of Carl. He studied art in high school and he likes to paint. I wish he would paint more, but he won't get out from under the car long enough to do much of it. Every once in a while, he'll write a sweet verse or two, but you bet he won't stick around to watch you while you read it. Carl would rather have his body hair painfully pulled out than spend money. I call him Scrooge. He's so tight he squeaks when he walks. In great contrast, I can't get rid of the stuff quickly enough. He always said to me, I could take the money you waste and have more than Donald Trump. He has great investment ideas, especially in real estate. Carl is one of those kind of people with a knack for buying property at a cheap price in some unlikely location and then having the interstate to go through there a few months later. I thought he was nuts when he bought the property a few years back that seemed like it was in the middle of nowhere. That nowhere is now where the Saturn planet in Tennessee is located. Not the Saturn planet. That nowhere is where the Saturn plant in Tennessee is located. He makes his own money, but our money is our money. And if I'm not mistaken, the Saturn plant was the car company Saturn, but I don't think they're around. Because remember, this book was written in the early 90s, so there's a lot of things that are not correct anymore, like the Saturn plant. He loves to ride horse trade. He loves a horse trade, not with real horses, but tractors, trucks, or whatever, and come out with something better than he started with. I sometimes feel lucky that nobody ever came along with a trashy-looking blonde country singer with fewer miles on me or on her and low maintenance. Oh, Esther Shop just said that they are done, so Saturn is out of business. That makes a lot of sense because I haven't seen one of those in a long time. Thank you for that. Okay, here is this man with all the money and material things he could ever want or need, and he still loves to dig around in dumps for what he calls treasures. I don't mind. I'll sit in the camper for hours and read or write while he's roaming around. Carl's mother told me that he always loved the dirt, and he still does. He used to sit for hours on an ash pile, digging around. She said she'd have to literally run him down to feed or change him his diaper. She once told me that she felt if it hadn't been for me, Carl would have never married. He's very much a loner, and of course that suits my lifestyle perfectly. We see each other often, but we are not in each other's face all the time. I often sit up late at night writing, as I am with this book, while he's snoozing away. Then he'll be up and gone before I get up. Carl's favorite place when he was little was an alley that he called the Cali. His mother would call for him, Carl Thomas Dean, where are you? And he'd say, downtown the Cali. I had a sign made by some of the craftsmen at Dollywood, my theme park, that says, down to the Cali, and put it over his barn workshop. Nothing could be more appropriate. I always know that if he's not in the house, he's down in the Cali. I love to smell Carl's clothes. When we were first married, I could smell that odor of grease and smokes. Yes, he does smoke cigarettes. He's trying to quit. I hope he has quit since then, on a side note. Smoking's terrible. He leaves his work clothes hanging in the mudroom, and sometimes I'll just smell them. especially if he's not around. I'm going out of town or I'm just missing him. Don't that sound silly? He does the same thing though. I wear a lot of perfume and sometimes I'll see him just walk into my closet and pull the frilly things up to his nose and get a good whiff. He always says that nobody smells like me. I have often wondered if something happened to one of us, whether we could stand to smell each other's clothes. My prayer is that we will die at the same time, so I won't have to worry about such things. We'd sure lose a lot if we lost each other. All of this might seem strange to people who know that Carl and I are not physically together much of the time. What must be understood is that we are always together emotionally and spiritually. An audience member at my TV show once asked me, "Do you believe in living together before you're married?" I joked, "Hell, I don't believe in living together after you're married." People who don't know Carl would think that he's shy and bashful. That's not really true. He loves to have a great time and was voted wittiest in his high school class. It's just that he's comfortable with his own surrounding, with people that he knows. Carl is very devoted to his family and friends. He's the first one to the hospital, the funeral home, taking food to the bereaved, whatever. He's also readily available to give the bride away if some redneck father in the family is too embarrassed, or if the truth were known, too afraid of crying in public. Carl looks great dressed up, and the bride never seems to mind the substitution. Carl loves to play characters. He will spend hours or even days working one up and putting together an outfit to try out a new one. He started out doing this kind of goober character with blacked out teeth and red underwear and a pillow for a stomach. Then once he became what he called the L.A. Doper. He was this odd guy wearing Mickey Mouse ears, smoking a tampon as a big joint. He goes to any length. Once, when I was having dinner guests, he came downstairs wearing a styrofoam wig on his head. He spent the whole evening as the two-headed monster, just as if that were the normal thing to do. One day, he taped a big head of cauliflower to the side of his head and said he had cauliflower ear. Well, a lot of comic types might have held the vegetables up to the ear for a second to make the joke, but only Carl would wear it for the rest of the day. Once I was in the kitchen having a manicure done by my friend Lois Baker. Well, in comes Carl from the barn with 10 big nails taped to the end of his fingers. "Can you do anything about these nails?" he asked Lois. She happens to think Carl is the funniest thing in the world, so she nearly busted a gut laughing. The funny thing is, I don't think he cares if anybody else laughs or not. It's more for his own amusement than anything. Ooh, we're almost done. Now that you know Carl, you'll understand better his reaction to an event in my career not long after we were married. Uncle Billy and I finally got our first big break. It came from the publishing side of our deal with Fred Foster. Bill Phillips wanted to record a new song we had written called "Put It Off Until Tomorrow." No, it was not about my wedding night. Not only that, but he had asked if the girl singer in the demo tape could sing harmony with him on the record. Naturally, the girl singer was me. The record was a big hit, and although I was not credited as a backup singer, disc jockeys all over the world, or all over America, began to ask, "Who is that girl singing harmony?" That gave Bill and me ammunition to go to Fred Foster and convince him I should be singing country. He agreed. I began to make records like "Dumb Blonde," which had been written by Curly Putnam, but seemed tailor-made for me, and a song I wrote called "Something Fishy." "Dumb Blonde" made it onto the top 10 for the country charts. Fred Foster must have felt that my career had found a pretty solid footing. He called me into his office one day and said, "If you and Carl still want to get married, I think it would be all right now." I couldn't help laughing. "Do you remember a year ago when you asked me not to get married?" Well, I did anyway. Fred laughed too. Carl and I had managed to keep our marriage a secret from the entire Nashville community. I didn't like deceiving people, but I'm glad I put my marriage first. The only one I really felt bad for was poor Mama Dean, who never got to have her big wedding. "Put It Off Until Tomorrow" was named the BMI Song of the Year in 1966. Uncle Bill and I were excited about going to the big ceremony to accept our awards. After all, this was the first of our songs to be recorded by a major artist. To have it recognized in that way by all of those established songwriters was a huge confidence builder for both of us. I asked Carl to go to the event with me, and he agreed. We rented him a tuxedo, and he looked very handsome in it, if a little uncomfortable. The tuxedo was the only beginning of a miserable evening for Carl. Everywhere we went, there were crowds of people, including photographers and everybody making a big fuss over us. Carl sat through the ceremony and patiently waited afterward a while. I shook hands and accepted congratulations from a throng of music industry people. I thought he was really handsome in his tux, but you could tell by the look on his face it suited him like a sock on a rooster. He didn't say much all evening long, but on the way home he took off his tuxedo jacket and tie, and then even his shirt. I'll never forget the way he looked sitting there in the car with his suspenders across his bare chest. Finally he turned to me and said calmly, "Honey, I love you, and I will support you in your career any way that I can. I know it's a big part of you, and wouldn't be the same person if you didn't do it. But the limelight's just not for me. I'll be there at home waiting for you, but I'm not going to any more of those wingdings." He has been a wingdingless man of his word ever since. It was at that moment that I first began to realize that a performer has to give up certain things in her personal relationship in order to have a bigger relationship with the public. By bigger, I don't necessarily mean better. Carl will always be my husband when the lights die down. I will always go home to him. He loves me for what I am, and he knows that my singing is a part of me. It was about to become a much bigger part. And that concludes chapter 9. Whew, that was the longest chapter I think that we have read in this entire book so far. That concludes us for today. We had just finished chapter 9 of Dolly. Let me turn it around. My Life and Other Unfinished Business. If you stuck with us through the end, even if you came halfway through, don't worry. You can watch this video for the next 24 hours here on Instagram. And yes. Oh, and of course, I have to turn this in some sort of marketing. So next time I'm going to feature a couple of the Dolly Parton products that we sell at our shop that are available also online. Because, hello, got to plug our store. But we know a really good talented artist in LA. Goes by the name of Dirty Lola, but it's Scarlet River, and she did the artwork for the Dolly Parton podcast that NPR put out recently, and she does some product that we sell. So we're going to showcase that next time as we read chapter 10 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. I hope you all have a great day. It's a good Tuesday. Instagram's telling me I have 1 minute and 55 seconds to go, so I'm going to cut it before they cut it. I'll see y'all later and have a good day. See ya.